welcome everybody to our session this evening on Algorithmic Awareness, helping young people navigate the digital world. This was organised by my school, which is the School of Education, Culture and Society. My name's Amber McLeod. I'm one of the lecturers here in the Faculty of Education. And I just wanted to introduce Vanessa Fernandez, who's going to come up and give our new head of school, Joe Lampert, a nice welcome.
All right, thank you for that. Actually, I just want to say good evening, everyone. And Jo is definitely not our new head of school. She's been gracious enough to take this role again when our dear old head of school decided he was moving back to the Faculty of Arts. But we're fortunate to have both of them here today, and I just want to thank you for all your service. But Jo, we just want to thank you also for stepping up and helping us at this time. So we've got a small presentation from the school.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much.
Do you want to say something?
Well, look, I'll just say that I had no idea that it is a privilege to be acting head of school of the School of Education, Culture and Society, and a great privilege to be here tonight working with Vanessa, but privy to the wonderful scholarship in our school. So we're very lucky in our school to have such great scholars. And thank you very much for coming out today. And thanks for this.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Vanessa. Okay, so let's start with the acknowledgement. So we meet today on the unceded lands of the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation. And today we're talking about algorithmic awareness, and algorithms are instructions or protocols, and Indigenous protocols, like the acknowledgement of country, remind us that algorithms can also be about respect, accountability and relationship. So I pay my respects to Bunurong elders past and present and recognise the enduring systems of knowledge that guide us in this place. Okay, now before I introduce our lovely panellists tonight, I thought we should begin with an introduction to algorithms. What are algorithms? So algorithms are step-by-step instructions, and we use them all the time. For example, recipes or rules of a game, when you're coding or programming, which is generally when we talk about it, that's when you're using algorithms. You're really just giving the computer step-by-step instructions. This is what you need to do. So the word algorithm isn't new, it's been around for a long time, but perhaps we don't use it very often. We tend to use words like instructions or rules or procedure or protocol instead of the word algorithm. But you would have been introduced to this at school. In maths, this is some examples from the maths curriculum, Victorian maths curriculum, and you can see in there that it's talking about algorithms. So, for example, in grade 3, you might try and work out, well, how does this number, what's the pattern of numbers here? How does it get from this number to that one to that one? And you work out what the algorithm is. What's the rule to get there? Or you might have, for example, in science, done something where you are trying to classify an animal. How many legs does it have? Does it have feathers and so on? And you might use a flow chart to try and figure out where something fits. They're all algorithms. So it's not a new word, but it's becoming more common. So let's look at how an algorithm would work in our everyday lives. And maybe as I run through this, think about YouTube or Netflix, where algorithms are used. So let's have a look at this. So a human writes step-by-step instructions. So there is a human there saying, this is how I want it to go. And then often there's some machine learning that adds to the algorithm. So it might add a few extra steps there. And even that part also involves humans because people are being paid very poorly to sit there and train the computers, and also they create the content that the computers are trained on. Then the next thing is data is collected. So what things are you clicking on? What topics are you interested in? How long are the videos that you're watching? Where were they made? Who posted the videos? And what's been tagged in their videos. So all that data is being collected. And then the algorithm analyses the patterns in the data and it makes some predictions. So it says, well, Amber watched Bridgerton, so we're going to give her Downton Abbey because we think she likes that kind of thing. Or maybe a documentary about castles in England or something. So it's predicting, because we collected this data, we think this is what's going to happen. Then I see it, I see the content, it's all ranked and put up there for me to choose from. And I say, that's rubbish, I'm not going to watch that. So I don't click on it and I click on something else. And then my response provides feedback to the system. And then it goes on and recommends something else. So that's really how a lot of algorithms are working in your day-to-day life. And yes, if you're talking about buying a new rubbish bin, your phone hears you and the ads for new rubbish bins pop up there. That you talking about it is collecting the data. Google Home, it is listening to what you're saying. Google Home and things like that, they're triggered by keywords and then they generally record for about 30 seconds. But if you look into the data, they're really, really bad at getting it right. So they're often accidentally tripped. And so they're picking up a lot of data that you don't think they are. So this can be helpful. And as one of my students said, but it improves my shopping experience. But, you know, it can also have some problems. Like, for example, my partner's really into old westerns and they just keep coming up as the recommendations on my Netflix and I can't stand it. But they're sort of fun algorithms we can talk about, but they can have a much bigger impact on your life. So they do underpin a lot of digital infrastructure that determines what you see, when you see it, and who it's coming from. So I've got a couple of examples here that I wanted to talk about. One of them, this first one here, is from banking. So, you know, when you apply for a credit card or you apply to get a loan or something and they collect some data from you, all that data goes into an algorithm that the bank has come up with and they determine how much you can borrow. So back in 2019, Apple launched a credit card and I just found this tweet which was looking at how this man is saying he and his wife, who have joint everything, both applied for it and he can get 20 times the credit limit she can. Because why? She's a woman. And, you know, a lot of you women out there might be in the same situation as me where you've set up the joint bank accounts, but for some reason they arrive in the mail to Mr. somebody. And you think, "Arr." So we know banks aren't great. And the other one I've got here is welfare. Now, that one, I have got robo-debt there. I'm not going to talk about that now, but that totally was an issue with algorithms. The one I've got to show you is kind of similar. So this one came from the Netherlands and it was similar to robo-debt in that they were trying to generate a risk score for fraud. So they collected all this data and you can see on there, you know, your age. If you were over 60, you had a decreased risk. If you were 30 or under, it was a higher risk. And if you look down there, you can see women are more of a risk than men. And then if you're not very good at speaking Dutch, you're more of a risk than men are. So and there's been a number of these that have come out. You know, every couple of years you see the algorithm played out in some kind of interactive ABC story where you can enter yourself in and you can find out, you know, what could I get? And actually, when they investigated this, they compared the results of this to random data and it was almost the same. So it didn't actually do anything. But there's a lot of things on there that the person didn't know they were being judged on. So, for example, you know, some things they can't change, like their gender or ethnicity, was being used in here. But also things like the length of someone's last romantic relationship, their ability to convince and influence others, how many times they'd emailed the city, and even whether they played sport. So all these things were going in there. For what reason? So we don't really know, right? But luckily, it was exposed and we started to get an idea of, these things are controlling our lives. They're having a real impact on us and we need to know about them. But it's not all bad. So here are a couple of good examples. Algorithms are also used in healthcare quite a lot. So I've got this picture on the side there, which came from the CSIRO report that I've got up there. And this young man developed an algorithm that would look at X-rays and scans and so on and give really detailed descriptive analysis underneath it using an algorithm. And it really, really improved the rate of diagnosis of a lot of different things because it was much more consistent than humans, because there was a particular algorithm it had to follow every single time, and humans are not that consistent. And then the other one is from the Ecological Society of Australia. They're using algorithms to help in conservation. So conservation is very labour intensive. So they were collecting a whole lot of photos and using algorithms to find out, how many wombats have we got left? What are the invasive species? Even is the environment being degraded? So they were aware much more quickly rather than having to go out and do surveys. They could still see very quickly what it was and so they could get on top of it. So one of the reasons we chose algorithmic awareness as a topic today is because it impacts all of us. And it's something that we need to have some kind of literacy in. There's already a digital divide in our society, and we often think about it in terms of age, but the evidence shows it's not really significantly age, it's exposure. And there was a famous paper that came out talking about digital natives, and unfortunately that term has really caught on. Actually, it was talking about people born in the 80s. So now if you're in your 40s, you're a digital native. So, as time has gone on, that description of digital native has moved further and further down in age. But completely not true. Here is the NAP ICT from 2022. This is not the most recent one because the results haven't come out yet. So this is like NAPLAN, but this is the ICT literacy one. And you can see since we started measuring it in 2005, you can see on here some percentages. Those percentages are the number of students, or the percentage rather, of students who have met the minimum level of digital literacy. So only 46% of Year 10 students met the minimum level. All the rest were under that, right? So young people are not just naturally picking it up. And the big issue with the digital native myth is not only do a lot of teachers believe it, and so therefore they don't explicitly teach students how to use technology because they think, they're young, they'll work it out, and often they're a bit scared about it themselves and they think they know more than I do. And the other thing is that students themselves believe it. So our students come into class, and I teach in digital technologies in education, and I ask them about their level of digital literacy, and they all say, I'm not very good. And they all say that, right? Because they think everybody my age is good at it and I'm not. So it's a really interesting thing to look at. So this digital divide is significant, and with AI it's getting even worse. So an example of that might be if you had 2 grade 3 students, for example, and you gave them both a maths app on an iPad. If one of the students had an iPad at home, had played games before, they will pick up the iPad and start working on the maths. If someone hasn't got an iPad at home, they pick up the iPad and they go, oh my gosh, what's this? And they start playing with it and they're completely distracted by the technology and they don't learn the maths. So it's not just digital literacy, it impacts their whole education. And if you leave school, you're not digitally literate, how do you do your banking? How do you get paid? So very, very important. And so algorithms are part of digital literacy. So let's have a look at attitudes towards algorithms. So this study is actually from 2021 and the participants are from Norway, but it's a very highly digitised country, and I think we can certainly use these lessons and talk about how it might be similar in Australia. And when I look at this, I certainly recognise my students here at uni and I recognise me. So my students here at uni, a few years ago, there was that scandal with the facial recognition software at Bunnings and Kmart and so on. I brought that up with my students and they were like, meh. They were like 1, 2 and 3. They were saying, oh, well, sometimes you get good recommendations. It's not that bad. It's not hurting me. And I'm 4, 5, 6. Oh my gosh. Because I can remember when, I talked about garbage bins and they arrived on my phone. They can't remember when that started. So for them, it's not such a big deal, but for me, it is. People are often pretty blasé, and if you look at the percentages there, 40% unaware, didn't even realise these algorithms were controlling their lives. So we do need to think about that. So when we talk about algorithmic awareness, then what do we mean? So an algorithmically aware person can recognise that algorithms are at work. They know that they are controlling their lives. And once you're aware of that, you start thinking all the time, why was I recommended that? Why did they say that? How come that outcome came out? Because you're then aware. And you have to remember that you do have agency here. So we were just talking before about phone numbers. So many places you go and they say, and just give me your phone number. Why do they need your phone number? You don't have to give them your phone number. Why are they collecting that data? Do they really need it? The next one is to question. So I was just saying, you can say, hang on a minute. We want to question the output because how do you know what the algorithm was? Was the algorithm reinforcing bias? Was there some kind of agenda behind that? You don't know how the algorithm was put together. So there's nothing wrong with questioning it. And understanding, you don't have to understand the technical bits. How was it programmed? How did it work? You just need to understand that it has an impact on you and you can take a critical stance. Awareness, so think about, for example, with AI at the moment, so my sister refuses to log in to ChatGPT. She uses it, but every time she does it, she clears all the caches. She's like, it's gone. They don't know I was here. Of course, they know she was there, but they don't have as much detail, right? So every time it's a new thing. So you can modify your settings and so on. And the other thing is, once you're aware, and much like the example with the conservation stuff, once they're aware there are invasive species or aware that the environment is being degraded, then you can do something. And it's the same when it's a negative thing. Once you're aware, and you do think about all those poor people with the robo-debt thing, obviously they were aware, but more of us should have been aware so that we could push back on it. All right, so that's my little blurb about algorithms and what they are and algorithmic awareness. And tonight we're going to hear from 3 panellists who have particular interest in this area. Next to me here, I've got Shubha Kayatsa, who's a feminist activist and researcher who works in the intersection of gender, sexuality and technology. Currently, she's a PhD candidate at RMIT, where she's researching how young queer people in Nepal are navigating privacy and visibility while expressing their self and sexuality in the digital space. She's the co-founder and former executive director of a Nepal-based digital rights organisation, Body and Data, which she was just telling me about. It sounds very interesting, that works towards making digital space accessible, safe and just. And Shubha is also a member of Global South-led Transnational Feminist Alliance Resurge, yeah. And then we also have Hannah Patox. She's a PhD candidate in the School of Social Sciences and the Monash Gender and Family Violence Prevention Centre. Her research investigates the lived reality of digital dating abuse for young women and femme-presenting young people across social media platforms in an Australian context. And we also have the lovely Claire Southerton, who is also in our school. She's a senior lecturer here, and her research explores how social media platforms and other digital technologies are used for learning and sharing knowledge. Her previous work has explored digital youth cultures, surveillance and privacy, digital health and sexuality. Her work has been published in the New Media and Society, Social Media and Society, and the Journal of Sociology. So, to get us started, I might start with you, Claire. What I'd like you to do, panel, is tell us a bit about your research and how algorithms, or why algorithms matter in your work.
Thank you. Most of my research, I talk to young people aged sort of 13 to 25 about their experiences on social media, talking to them about things like misinformation. And I think algorithms really shape their experience of social media in positive and negative ways. I think that they do, to some extent. It was interesting kind of seeing the list of what we think of as algorithmic awareness, because I think they demonstrate lots of those things, but to really varying degrees. So many of them will talk about doing some of those practices of kind of playing around with their algorithm. I've done some projects talking to young people about TikTok in particular, and I think it's one of those platforms that's very algorithmically driven. It's primarily about recommending content, and I think some of them were really engaged with thinking critically about the content that's recommended to them, and would have very strong reactions to, positively or negatively about things that were like content that they saw. But then equally, for some young people, it was barely on their radar that content was curated for them, and they would see things that made them uncomfortable or unsafe, and they didn't know why that they had seen it. So I think in my work, it's gone the full gamut of a real lack of awareness, or really incredible critical thinking, creative thinking, being able to respond to algorithmically curated spaces in such a huge range of ways. So yeah, for me, I think algorithms can be a really nice conversation point in research to get young people thinking about their digital experiences.
Yes, hello. I'm in a slightly different area and a slightly different age group too. So I look at like young women, so like 18 to 25. So there's sort of like that young adulthood, not that we use that term, it's youth. So in my research, I sort of look at the way social media platforms and algorithms as part of that are used to perpetrate abuse within relationships, perpetrate concerning or harmful behaviours. But also then how young women, who is my particular cohort, use those same systems to perform resistance, to perform safety work, to keep themselves safe, and to that sort of thing. So also like there's this blend of like the right to digital intimacy and the right to have this digital life, but then also working protectively within these systems that are not necessarily set up with them in mind.
I do kind of work with mostly young people at the moment in my research, but at the same time, I do work on the area of digital culture, and like how digital culture is part of our everyday life, right? And like now, algorithm we can't not speak about it anymore. It's so embedded in everything we do. Unlike the early days of internet, right? Where we could like go in, log in, and then do the thing, and then log out, and then, go about our life. So like you said earlier, what we do in the internet, what we see, what can we do, it's all also determined by algorithm. So it's not just like, it's up to me, or it's up to the person. Like what kind of job you can get, including, global politics. It's all been affected. Especially in my work with young people, and especially those from marginalized group. Internet is their everyday work, everyday thing. It's part of their culture. And at the same time, for a lot of young people, digital space is the only safe space where they can go access information, community. And because of algorithm in play, the thing that they can now access, the place that they can now go, is being affected. The content that they want to go and find, for example, especially young people,
people, they would want to find information on like STI, HIV, SRHR, like sexual health. But we know Google bans those things. Now you can't search STI information in Google anymore because it's actually been censored by Google as a company, and YouTube is part of Google as well, right? Like Google is quite spread. It's everywhere basically. And especially talking about young people, they are seen as this like passive recipient of like, yeah, they just use technology, and they're not really consulted of like, what kind of fear do you have? What do you like to use? They're not seen as actors, let's say. Whereas online, offline, like I said earlier, it's so intertwined, and them being seen as this passive recipient within how they're experiencing internet is not actually helping. And I think that comes in the prospect of like my work.
That's such a good point. Sorry to interrupt, but I think that, I think that the kind of intersection of all of the spaces that they want to go to get information, like being now proprietary, like, thinking about the way that they're all commercial spaces now, we sometimes forget that these are the spaces where young people hang out. Like a lot of the offline spaces don't exist anymore. And so they're now having to spend their social time in these commercial private spaces that are managed by these massive international companies, managed very poorly. And that's something that's very challenging. Is, we can talk about the ways that they need to be aware about algorithms, but it's also a big ask when it's like these young people doing their best versus Google. It's a huge responsibility. Yeah, really good points.
Okay. So the next question is, how do algorithms impact our emotional experiences and relationships?
Well, I mean, in the dating world, in a huge way, if you're thinking about like algorithms as part of dating apps, or even just like, I've written down kindred spirits, but like connecting with like-minded people potentially to date, or just make friends online, showing you the communities that you maybe didn't know you wanted to be part of, or maybe you were searching for them. But I think, that there's really positive ways that it does that in this sort of, like hyper digital space. I think there was something about, you were telling me about how like young people are really uncomfortable to like do something embarrassing in person because they're so used to like being behind the digital, behind the, anyway.
No, it's a good point. And I think sometimes, like I think we are very familiar with imagining some of the algorithmic harms, and we can definitely talk about that. But I mean, having content curated for you to help you find your community is really valuable. Like seeing content recommended that feels like you're seen, or that you're part of a, other people are like me. That is the kind of fundamental purpose, the positive purpose of algorithms, to recommend things that, if it was only doing that, it would be nice, and if it wasn't recommending like, scary stuff. But, a lot of young people talk about the value of seeing themselves in content that they see online, especially when it comes to, minority groups. There's extensive research that talks about the value of online spaces for young queer people, for marginalised groups, to feel supported, especially if they are in remote areas, if they're in places where they wouldn't see themselves represented. It's, those young people have a right to a digital community. And this is the problem with some of these, I guess the big kind of Google in the room, is that some of these platforms are taking that space and, making enormous profits off it, but not being very careful or caring about the impact of that can have. And I guess that's some of the stuff that I found in my research, is young people talking about the immense value of these spaces, but also sometimes how they can be unsafe.
Yeah, absolutely. And adding to that, also how algorithms feed on our emotions, right?
Yeah.
Because, when we're scrolling through, you get this like surge of emotion looking at content from Palestine, and then the next swipe is like this funny cat videos. So how also algorithm is learning from us, like, and feeding us, and kind of like normalizing certain kind of this shift, which is not always healthy, right? Like in terms of like personal, emotional level, I would say.
Yeah.
And at the same time, algorithm works in such a mysterious way. And a lot of parents, and like my friends who are parents now, they are so worried like how to go about this, especially as young parents, like with their child who are like 2 years old, like 7 years old. So there's just like whole like moral panic around like, oh my God, what do I do now? Because as an adult, I think we can make decisions, because I think a lot of people here in the room, we didn't grow up with internet. But then people now, younger people who's digital culture is part of their work, part of their world. They are like parents are having to figure out what to do. So my friends are coming up with their own solutions, like giving only 2 hours a day in the phone or internet, only letting them play a certain kind of game in front of them. So like parents are really worried of like what to do, and I think the need here, like talking about emotions, this like worry is a real emotions, right? And then I think there is this like big conversation on like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? This like panic. And then the conversation is just like stuck there because we are not exactly talking beyond this like panicky mood and not listening to each other. So I think technologists, social scientists, parents, everyone need to listen to each other like clearly. And to see like, okay, what are the damage? What can we do? What are the real concerns that parents have, so that we're not also dismissing them at the same time, right? And then the moral panic, to add on to that, this is not something new either. Like my grandparents, they were not sent to school, like especially my grandmother, because they were seen as like, what if they would elope with someone, if they get educated, or their mothers probably weren't even allowed to touch books, because it's like, oh my God, what if they read something like immoral, right? And maybe in my parents' generation, it was TV or radio, and now with the younger generation, it's phone. So it's nothing new. This like moral panic situation has always existed. We just need to like have a different lens to it. And now that we are laughing of like, oh my God, TV was seen as this like immoral thing, probably this will happen in like 30 years around like technology as well. So also like having that in perspective would be good. Yeah. Thanks.
Good point. Now, we have already touched on this, and I might get you to start on this, but what tensions exist between the goals of companies that employ algorithms and the well-being of their users?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the primary issue is really that platforms, their entire orientation is just towards engagement, right? And so when and engagement doesn't mean you're enjoying the content. Engagement doesn't mean that it doesn't mean anything about your relationship to the content, and that's difficult because it means that if you're looking, if somebody's looking at a video and they're just lingering on it because it is disturbing or because it's shocking or it's angering, or we've all probably had this experience. If you watch something on YouTube and you're like, wow, that was horrifying. You'll suddenly get recommended, lots more of that kind of content simply because you were kind of transfixed by something that you didn't enjoy. Or if these are quite simplistic ways of seeing our engagement with these platforms. And the difficulty is that we're kind of, I guess human beings are more complex than that. The algorithms are very simple. The intention is to get users to engage more. And when we're using the platform, we're trying to find things that we enjoy, we're trying to find communities, we have very different intentions when we're using a platform. And yeah, that means that the platform's not interested in facilitating community, they just want us to keep using. And that sounds very negative. It's not to say that, it's just that we have really different goals. And ultimately, that's the kind of stuff that we want to, that's the kind of awareness we want to build in young people, is that they should have that critical awareness that the platform is not there to support your community. You're building a community despite the platform's intentions. And ultimately, a good goal would be to build platforms that we own rather than, a company owning them. But when I talk to young people, I've seen them doing this. They use the platforms in completely irregular ways. Like I did a project talking to young people about TikTok, and some of them were making videos using the platform and never posting them. So they were using the platform to make, there's lots of video editing tools in TikTok, and they didn't want to post them because they were making them for their friends. So they just saved the videos on their own device and shared them with their friends in a message, in a text basically. And so they were manipulating the platform to use it for their own purposes. They didn't want to share the content with others. They just wanted to make fun videos, and they made, one of them made like massive, they compiled videos that they took every week, and then they gave it to a friend who was leaving the school at the end of the year, moving away. And that was a beautiful gift that they were able to make because the platform allowed this amazing editing tool they never would have learned at school. It was really easy to use. And I tell you that example to show you that kids are already doing this, and if we can give them that confidence to deviate from what the platform encourages them to do, they're not, we don't have to comply with what the platform wants.
Okay.
Yeah, there's just building on that. There's like a huge problem with reporting like relationship abuse through platforms. It's really hard to like gather it across different accounts a perpetrator might have made, or something might not look like abuse, but to the naked eye or to an external person, but then it is experienced as that for the person. And so they're coming up against reporting systems in these platforms that then say, actually, we deem this within the community guidelines of our platform. And so then they're experiencing that as, oh, this mustn't be legitimate abuse, which is heartbreaking. But it's this, like, awareness of this sort of stuff would help in that situation to then be like, this is just a platform that is a money-making business. It doesn't mean that my experiences aren't legitimate abuse or experiences like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and adding on to what two of you were saying, one is like how they're monetizing our data, right? Like every move, every like, every second that we are lurking on the internet. And at the same time, they would also censor what we are saying if it doesn't fit into their quote-unquote community guideline that they wrote for us, right? Like they made rules for what we can do and cannot do. And the money they're making out of each of our content, they are now using that money to fuel genocide, right? Like, so, you know, the connection is not just like my relationship with technology and these companies, but what are these companies doing in the world? And also, like, these are mostly like, you know, few companies that you can count in your hand, like palm, and few people who are like making tons and tons of money. Like, we're talking about like big money. And in Silicon Valley. Some outside Silicon Valley, but then mostly there. And I wanted to talk a bit about also how these algorithms that are designed by these companies who enforce their own law are also biased, right? There was a study that I was reading that was conducted in Australia. They created this like anonymous account of pretending to be a teenager, Australian teenager. And within 30 minutes, the account was exposed to a lot of like anti-women content, anti-feminist content. And it just shows like how young Australian men are exposed to certain kind of anti-gender sentiments. And it's kind of scary like how these algorithm works. And then there is no way to actually make these companies accountable, because even if you report them, it's all up to their content moderation based on their own policy, whether or not they think it's violation, right? So also those aspects of like how these companies functions, which are like really kind of the architecture of it, the design of it, in the interface, which means like what we see, and also behind the screen. Both of it is in their terms, which does not really like benefit younger people or all of us.
That's so interesting. That reminds me of a podcast I listened to where one of the people on it has a number of social media accounts in the US where she's a Democrat in one and a Republican in another one. And so she reports on what she's seeing. So interesting. Okay, now so again, Claire, you've touched on this, so maybe we'll start with Shubha on this one. How are users finding ways to push back against the algorithms that shape their online lives?
Yeah. Actually, I was in this conference 2 months ago, and people were sharing around these things. So though, like, I think we all do it subconsciously, consciously, like, you know, engaging, liking certain content, certain profile, certain account, and not liking or not following certain account. or watching certain things over and over again, resharing it, sending it to your friends, like all of that kind of engagement of the content that you like, yes, it's still algorithm. Like you're liking a cat content and they're giving you tons of cat contents, right? But at the same time, within that ecosystem of like how we are being played by these companies, I think people are also finding little moments of the agency of like, pushing it a bit further away, finding their own time, like a queer time, we call it, in terms of the like linearity of like, how things goes in digital media. So, and also what we call doom scrolling, right? A lot of people think doom scrolling is such a waste of time, and then, it's like not good for you. Yeah, it's not really 100% good either, but at the same time, it also means like, okay, talking in a broader philosophical sense, it also questions the idea of like what you're supposed to do with your time. For example, our capitalistic society asks you to be more productive, like count every minute, if you're not working, then go to the gym, right? Like if you're not in the gym, then like read a novel, whatever. So this like doom scrolling, being on the internet is also like pushing this idea of like how you're supposed to make the use of the time. And then, yeah, making your own space around it. Thanks.
You had some good.
Yeah, I guess, so there was something that happened with the young women within my study where they were performing these acts of resistance in really subtle ways, again, in these like sort of subtle, incremental sort of ways. And one of these was particularly related to purposefully changing the algorithm on dating apps, but also just like generally her intention was to make it a safer, cleaner space sort of thing. And she was talking about how she was really actively reporting people, anyone that she felt was doing anything unsafe or predatory, she refers to it as. And she speaks about, she's like, oh my God, I feel like the world's policeman. Some people I just deleted if they just seem stupid, but some people, if they actually seem dangerous, I'd report them. And it was this like, this like purposeful action to make it a better space by shifting the algorithm there, which was really interesting.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I had similar, kind of similar to you, some participants who kind of engaged in this deliberate, trying to change their algorithm. So I had one participant in the study looking at TikTok who she was coming up against lots of content that she found very triggering around body image, which a lot of young women talk about. And she described engaging in some of this, some reporting of content, some kind of trying to deliberately like swipe quickly when she came across those videos, and then also deliberately engaging a lot with body positive content on the platform, and that eventually effectively got rid of a lot of that content from her feed. And she also described kind of these really interesting tensions between feeling quite angry at the platform about seeing that kind of content, and then also feeling like, I guess, really empowered by the body positive content that she'd come across. And when you think about some of the, I guess, what we might call the algorithmic harms, which is like the, being targeted by that kind of content, but also, I guess, the opportunities of coming across people creating content that might give you language to respond or speak back to some of that stuff. That was a really nice conversation and some, I think, a young person who was really able to think quite critically about, digital content and those digital spaces, but also it felt a little bit empowered to respond to it. So I think there are lots of examples of ways that people are trying to change in the example of TikTok, like their For You page, or curate digital spaces that feel more safe, and not necessarily accept the digital space as they receive it. I had lots of participants that described those things, but equally some that just felt empowered to leave, which I also thought is perfectly legitimate. You don't owe a platform your time, but just kind of had those moments of discomfort and then would switch it off, which is also perfectly fine.
That's really interesting. And listening to you say that, I'm thinking about my own behaviour when I'm doom scrolling. And that I do, if there's something that I am interested in, or maybe something I want to buy, but I don't want to buy it now, I'll spend more time, even though I'm not going to buy it, I spend more time looking at it because I think if I look at it for a long time, it'll come up again, right? Because that is part of the algorithm too, is the amount of time that you spend looking at it. So I hadn't realised I was doing, but as you're saying that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm doing that. Okay, what can we learn from the ways people are creatively navigating platforms they still want to be part of, even when those platforms don't always serve them well?
That's a good question.
I think I usually think of babies. We think like baby don't know anything, right? Like, but then they really know. Like, if it's like a bit risky, they would like hold on to something. They'll like hold on your finger. I don't have a baby, but then I talk about children a lot, by the way. And they'll hold on to your finger very tightly. So people know how to protect themselves. Like, it's an instinct. It's also like bodily reaction, right? And we should not forget that, I think, in a way. And sometimes we tend to forget it, and we put in like all these walls and all these like regulations in place because we think like that's gonna prevent the harm from happening. And I want to bring our attention to the social media ban of young people in Australia that might be implemented, or that's on the way of implementation from early next year, of like how that is seen as prevention towards like younger people being exposed to quote unquote harmful content. And that is straightforward censorship, and then like young people who should have right to information, right to access to uncensored content. Now it's been affected by those kind of policies. And not just young people who are going to be affected by these kind of policies, but all of us. Because the way you can verify the person is a young person is through ID verification, which means possibly when we sign into YouTube or any other account, we will have to verify ourselves that we are not children by showing our ID card or like inputting our data, which means a lot of our personal data is going to go out there in platforms. And even the Privacy Commissioner of Australia, they have put out a statement saying that this is going to be scary, right? So all of that is happening, but at the same time, we still want to really focus on regulation and regulation of our behavior on technology platform, right? Like, whereas we should be talking more about what's going to happen, what is happening, how do we find a solution together, which is, I think, should be our focus.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because I think, thinking about the social media ban, that kind of makes you think of what this question makes me think of in terms of my own research, but is that I guess I keep coming back to this point that like young people are entitled to have digital spaces, and the ways that they creatively respond and reconfigure these spaces is because they want digital spaces. They want safe digital spaces. They want to work, figure something out so that it works for them. But, the social media ban to me is it's a fantasy that we can solve these really messy, complex problems by being they just won't use it, and then magically at 16 they'll become really good and safe and everything will be fine. But it doesn't address the problem. I mean, it doesn't address the problem at all, but it doesn't deal with the fact that young people are entitled to safe digital lives, and we also all are as well. We don't, just because if we're unhappy with how social media platforms are moderating content now, saying that, okay, there's going to be no children on there, that's not going to improve the safety of digital platforms at all. That's just going to say, well, yeah, you don't have to moderate them effectively at all because don't worry, there's no kids on there. I don't want to be on a social media platform that's not safe for kids. I think that sounds terrible. I think that, we should actually be, talking to young people about what their experiences are and giving them more of a voice in these kind of conversations, because the kind of workarounds and creative things that they do to make these social media platforms work for them, we should probably be doing some of those things, and people are doing those things. But I think they're also definitely going to work around the social media ban and are already figuring out how to do it, it's not going to be effective either. But I think it's so important to I guess, take a children's rights perspective and think about, like you say, it is censorship, and it is also what kind of voice do we think children deserve? And I think,
And like the right to build their skills in digital
Yeah.
literacy by using their spaces, and like a big part of like safety work, or like learning how to date in a safe way is, it doesn't mean you have to experience abuse to then learn how to date safely, but like, learning these small incremental skills of, oh, okay, I'll just post after I've left that
Yeah.
event, that feels safer to me, or, like they're building all these skills as they go, and just dropping them in when they hit 16 seems terrifying, but yeah, it's also like it's sweeping away all of those skills that they would have been learning during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that's something that, I've learned a lot from talking to young people, is that when they've, it's very hard to describe these experiences, to describe algorithms in the abstract. We've all had this experience of being like, it's a series of instructions. When
Amber did a really good job.
Yeah, that's right. No, yeah. But you know what I mean? When they're talking about, oh, I had a targeted advertisement that didn't feel like I felt like it I felt like I was profiled in a really weird way. That's a really valuable experience to say, okay, let's talk about how targeted ads work. Or if, a video is recommended to them and they say that, I felt really seen by that and I sent it to a friend, and it was this really fun bonding experience for us. You can talk about what that means. If we're taking away all of these micro exposures, and then we're sort of teaching it all theoretically, and then at 16 we're like, off you go. We wouldn't really socialize our children with anything else that way. It seems bizarre, but I think, I guess that's what we're going to do.
So you're saying just dropping them off in the middle of the CBD?
Yeah,
after.
that's what it feels like to me. I think if we think about digital spaces, digital social spaces are just like physical social spaces, right? You wouldn't take your, 16-year-old, you wouldn't keep your 16-year-old in the house up until 16 and then take them on their 16th birthday to the CBD and be like, off you go, you're now an adult. That would be awful. And they would probably, just have a panic attack and never go back. And because every social space has inherent dangers, and I think a more safe way would be to slowly socialize them into an appropriate way to enjoy that social space. And, physical social spaces also have fun things in them. And they're also entitled to safe physical social spaces.
And I think also offering this broad range of functions and features where they can tailor their experience to what they want is so important too. The women in my study talk a lot about using functions like muting and restricting and having an account where that perpetrator can still access them, but then they have their other account for their friends, their main account, they want to be able to strategically use the spaces in ways that work for them, but they'll need platforms for making more nuanced functionalities then to be able to do that.
Yeah, some really interesting stuff. So I'm just thinking about what I've been listening to, because this isn't really my area of research, and it seems really clear after listening to you guys, especially for younger people, that a lot of them will find their space online, that they're not, or find information even about STIs. I didn't know they were being blocked, but finding things that they need that they can't get anywhere else online, which is really interesting. And I just had one more question as you were all chatting away. Shiba, you were talking about, how a lot of the platforms are held in the hands of a few people in Silicon Valley. And I was wondering, what impact do you think culture has in here? Because US culture and Australian culture are quite different. Do you think if we had social media platforms that were based in Australia, it would make any difference?
That would be another layer of censorship, I would say. Right?
Right.
And to add on to this question, maybe not exactly linked to the question that you are asking, because I was home 2 months ago for my research data collection, and a lot of content that people are consuming in Nepal are from the US.
Yes.
Because they all are familiar with Trump administration and what he's been doing, all of that, and how is that impacting queer communities, right? So people are consuming, and also like I don't think the tech companies would do it anyway because they're getting so much money out of all of that. But then also like, yeah, restricting content from region or country, I don't think that's helpful because that's again like not abiding to right to information. That, you know, if you go by like this journalism, media kind of lens, yeah.
I guess I was thinking more if the media company came out of Australia, so it was Australian culture versus the US culture that's being sort of put onto us, if you thought it would make any difference.
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, like, what is Australian culture anyway, right? Like, it's been
Not
so
that.
mixed.
Well, something interesting happened a while back when TikTok was briefly banned. So I don't know if people remember this. It was like, I don't know, 24 hours or something. But people in America were like freaking out, and they all started using a Chinese app called Red Note. And it was like, I think Americans thought they were going to Red Note to have this exotic experience of like, what is happening in the outside world. I think expecting a certain view of China. And then it turned out that they got access to all these experiences where people in China were like, we feel sorry for you guys. Your country is in shambles. And then they got access to content coming out of China that was like, you know, modern day Chinese cities and people living normal, comfortable lives. And they were like, that was interesting because I think because of the algorithmic curation of content on TikTok, a lot of Americans only see American content. A lot of Australians only see American content. And they were really shocked by what they saw. They expected to see people, I guess, like, I don't know, living in the dirt. I'm not really sure what their vision of China was, but it certainly wasn't like incredibly industrialized, like, you know, really like high rises everywhere. And yeah, people were like totally radicalized by it. In a good way, in the sense that they were like, wow, this like capitalism hasn't worked. They were just, it was really interesting. And I think, you know, your question's interesting that maybe I guess the dominance of these very few American companies has certainly, it certainly feeds this sort of cultural imperialism that has so many bad effects. You know, and not all bad, but certainly like some really interesting specific harms. Like, you know, we see this a lot in schools that kids are like really aware of like American politics, but then you'll be like, who's the prime minister? And they're like, eh. And like that's kind of on us for having so many prime ministers, but it's also like there's been a lot of presidents, and like, yeah, like Australian kids are like weirdly on top of that stuff. And some of that is the dominance of US content. So yeah, something to think about. Maybe we should. I think what I would advocate for, rather than like necessarily an Australian kind of version, is more like not having platforms that are so commercially driven. We should have public spaces online that belong to everyone. And maybe that's like a fantasy, but I think it would be really nice.
And at the same time, also making the existing platforms accountable, right?
Yeah.
Asking them like, okay, what are you doing to our data? Asking them also to make sure that, you know, if they really want to protect children, then to make sure that there is appropriate content. It's not just like banning it or censoring or shadow banning it. So making them accountable of like, what are they doing? Yeah, I think those are the...
Well, and I would add to that I would advocate for them getting more people of diversity in the rooms that they're designing these functionalities and algorithms and features. And I didn't mention before, but there's like these algorithmic functions like on Facebook there'll be like people you may know, suggestions, and it can sometimes be like a perpetrator's family member or even the perpetrator's new account. Which can be really triggering for victim survivors, and they would tell you that if they were asked. And the other one that the algorithm produces is the memories from a year ago or something like that. Can also be, it can be a non-threatening image of just a dog, for example, but if your partner had killed that dog to, you know, threaten you, it's, just like having those experiences, they could tell you straight away what would be harmful. Yeah,
that's a great point. It's like when so many of the harms that come about from these systems are because they are designed by such a narrow range of people. Like, who's in the room designing this? You know, it's literally just like white Silicon Valley guys who are like, wouldn't it be great if I could, program an algorithm to pick who gets this job? And then it's like, oh, what do you know? The system is so biased and it only hires people that look exactly like you. Like, it would only take having more people making those decisions together for some issues to get raised earlier.
And planning ahead for it, because the other problem is they talk about, scholars talk about, like this, platforms respond to problems on their platforms in this patchwork governance approach where it's Band-Aid solutions on problems. They're like, oh, we didn't know this could happen. We'll quickly do something to fix it, whereas they could just plan for what would happen ahead of time and save us all.
They always have a PR person. Like, I have been in spaces where tech platforms are being questioned, and they would only send their public-facing person, and every time people would bring up, like, hey, what are you doing to that particular issue? They'll be like, thank you so much for your recommendation. We'll take this to the office. Like, that's the only thing I've heard from them.
All right. Well, I think we will see if there are any questions. And maybe, so we've got a QR code there where you can type questions, or we will ask for questions in a moment from the audience. But to give you some time to think about that, are there any things you didn't get to say that you would like to mention?
Things I didn't say. I feel like I yabbered a lot.
I think one more thing about tech accountability around like consent, right? Because whenever we sign on to something, we just tick mark and say like, yeah, we consent, because there's no option. If you don't consent, you can't use that platform or service. So this like consent in like black and white approach of like, I'm consenting to something that I don't know about. Whereas like consent in other spaces, we go in nuance around like what it is, right? Like it's not black and white. Whereas like when it comes to platforms, like it's so normalized that, we are consenting to something that we don't know. So also I think like making that, like talking more about it, like questioning them about it. Like give me a shot of like what you're doing and then I'll consent to it. Like we don't even have a space to go and tell them that.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's true. I often will take the part of the TikTok privacy stuff and use it with my students and say, every time, when you download TikTok to your phone, this is what you're consenting to. They can see all your keystrokes. They know all the apps you've got on there. And they're just like, oh. But you're right. You download an app and you just go, agree.
Yeah, because who reads those things?
Yeah,
They're so long.
They're so long.
Yeah.
And so like then you give up your right to be part of these spaces.
Yeah,
so,
it's really true.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really...
All right. Do we have any questions? Yep.
I have one. Claire, thank you. Claire spoke a lot about dropping the kids in the CBD. And I have great fears when Shuba's working specifically with marginalised groups and Hannah with endangered groups. They already are a wonderful place for these kids to find safety. Where are they going to go when this legislation becomes effective?
Yeah,
it's a real concern.
Yeah, that's a great question. Does anyone want to? I think, it's really interesting. There's been kind of previous bans in other countries that have sort of tested the waters with this a little bit that give us a sense of what might happen. And realistically, probably a lot of kids are just going to bypass the ban using different technological means. So there's a lot of relatively easy ways to get past these kind of things. My concern is that will encourage, when kids are accessing social media using like semi-illegal means, it gets them into other digital trouble. And that is, so there's a really interesting case in Ukraine some years ago when a prominent social media platform that lots of people used was banned, and it got lots of people unintentionally using the dark web to access that platform. And that's the kind of stuff I'm concerned about, is kids unintentionally we kind of end up teaching them bad digital stuff because they're trying to get to the thing that they were already using. So that's my main worry, is that they're still going to access these digital spaces because, exactly like you say, they're really important, but they'll do it using like semi-unsafe or very unsafe means, which is a big concern. But also because it's so difficult to enforce the ban, I think it's possible that a whole range of different, like, patchwork solutions will emerge. So different platforms will pop up that are not currently covered by the ban. Maybe young people will go there, but then that might then be covered by the ban. So I think a range of different things will happen. But I am really concerned that very marginalised groups will be really disproportionately affected. So kids that don't have great digital literacy because they're already marginalised.
Getting onto the dark web is really challenging.
Yeah.
You have to know how to get on there to be able to do it.
Those kind of skills can really easily spread when kids are really motivated, right? So, yeah, I think that could happen. I'm not saying it'll happen.
There's also the thing of them taking up other sort of apps and spaces that aren't necessarily for that purpose and then using them for the purpose of a social media type thing. There's an example that's slightly adjacent, but where there's like a children's friendship app, so it was like underage, like Friends to Connect app called Yubo. It used to be called Yellow, and lots of my participants were talking about how they used to use it as a dating app while they were underage, and it was like they weren't allowed in those spaces, so they changed this app into that to function in that way. So, yeah.
Yeah, kids will make a social media platform out of nearly anything. And I think that'll be really interesting. But yeah, I think the concern with things like that is when they're doing things covertly and they're not, and when they know that they're breaking the rules, they might not be as willing to share what's happening with parents. Yeah, and if something unsafe happens, they're like, oh, I shouldn't have been doing that anyway. Maybe I won't tell someone what's going on. And that's really what we don't want to happen. We want kids to feel safe sharing anything that unsafe that happens with them online. That's, I think, the biggest risk.
Okay. Yep. Nick?
Thanks. Sitting here as a parent of a 10-year-old, what are the practical tips or top 3 takeaways for parents in this situation to develop digital literacies? Because we are doing that, but where do we go? What do we do?
Yeah.
I don't have to answer that question actually, because I'm not a parent. I haven't done much digging around it, but I'm pretty sure there are like age-appropriate information available, right? And then I actually don't know, and that's what I was trying to emphasize, that we don't know. There's a lot of questions and there's a lot of like sentiments, and like why are we not tackling those and then like instead of banning it, you know? Yeah, but maybe folks would know.
Yeah, I think the main thing that comes out of the research that I've seen is that the number one thing you can do is have a great relationship with your child. I know that's like not really what people want to hear, and I think that, and a lot of parents that are worried are already doing a lot of the stuff that they can be doing. We can't put like all of the responsibility on parents. Like a lot of this stuff is about governments being willing to regulate tech companies in ways that make sense and not banning kids, but actually looking at like, okay, what kind of data are they collecting? What kind of, what kind of privacy agreements do they have? What kind of content moderation strategies are they using? A lot of the content moderation is done very cheaply, and that's why it's so bad. It's because it's expensive to do it well. But from your perspective, what you can do, it is about building trust with your child, so that, and thinking, scaffolding what is appropriate. Like, so it's really tough with a kid that's 10. There's not that many digital spaces that they can safely explore solo. Everything's going to be, a lot of stuff that you have to do with them. But when they get older, thinking about when you have a good relationship with your child, then they can, and know that they can come to you if they experience something that's unsafe, and you're not making them feel guilty about it. It's about feeling comfortable to share.
Yeah, like learning that like discomfort is just a great red flag to go and find out more, and not to like hide it from anyone. Discomfort, we should be explored and discussed, and being a safe person for that.
And it's so true, because there's so many teachable moments.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, I love a microphone. But like example, my son will play a game and he goes, Mum, I've got to go back and play it now because it's going to cut off in a minute. And you're sort of like, well, mate, guess what? That is really the algorithm that's luring you back in to play that game. And then you see the penny drop sometimes. All right. And, so there's lots of teachable moments that I think. So it's right about connection and trust and being open to always have that dialogue. I think that's a help. But parents are in the panic.
And that's a beautiful example, like, taking those opportunities when you can. And it is hard because you have to do a lot of learning. And it is like as things change, it becomes even more things that parents have to learn about. But it is a great opportunity, exactly like you say, to say, okay, what are you feeling in this moment? Why? And, trying to tap into that. Yeah, it's a great example.
And I can imagine, sitting around watching, well, I don't know if you watch TV with your kids, but if you're watching Netflix or something and comes up, just saying, look what the algorithm's giving me now, like just opening the conversation. We might take one from online and then we'll come back to you. I think that first one maybe has already been answered because that's, unless you had anything to add to that, what do you think is the best way, most important thing when it comes to teaching young people about algorithms and developing algorithmic awareness? So Nick kind of mentioned it. Have you got any other comments on that?
Oh, there was a great line in this book. It's so good. How to be a woman online. But there was just this line I was reading earlier. I wanted to make sure I read out. But it was like to teach people that your timeline is your queendom, not a democracy. So you should embrace blocktivism. You should embrace blocking, deleting, muting wherever you please, because this is your space to be. You don't have to just accept what's coming to you. I just thought
That's
that was,
good.
yeah.
Practicing. I like that. All right, how about as the knowledge database is governed by Western dominant knowledge as input, it creates data bias. How do these biases interact? And how do we help youth navigate both algorithm and data bias?
Jump in.
I guess talking more about it, and people talk about also going to schools and doing these kind of events. And I hear that it's really difficult in Australia to enter school space and do events and organize stuff. But then actually speaking the language that children understand, right? I think that's something we don't know. And I don't think there's a lot of work in terms of speaking their language and making them understand what it means. And the other thing is definitely children know that there's the algorithm being played. Like how we can tell, right? So it's not that they're not aware. It's just that it's also really hard for them to not engage in those platforms because that's where they are. So I guess developing more tools to work with children. I'm looking at the question again.
Or maybe as you're saying, they might feel it but not be able to articulate it. So maybe it's practicing, language, giving them examples, modelling.
And at the same time, while we talk about bias in the digital space, also speaking to them about bias in the real world around us, right? Because the biases in the algorithm is actually reflected, it mirrors the biases and discrimination we face in the world. So making them, more aware of what's happening around them, who are their neighbors, what the government is doing to them, what color of skin they are, and are they getting good jobs, whatever, all these kind of social structural issue, because technology and algorithm, they are not just this silo, secluded idea. It is part of the larger social cultural space that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think often when we get anxious about the impact of these kind of technologies, we forget that they come from us. They come from, they have a human origin, and they're not. That's why these kind of technological solutions aren't going to solve the problem. We can't ban them. We can't, that's not going to address these kind of root issues. And of course, algorithmic bias reflects societal bias, like you say. And if we can't just, if we talk to children only about algorithmic bias, it might make them think that it's just the algorithms that are biased and not, the broader social issues that feed into that bias.
Good point. All right, and we had another one here.
Hi. Just one sharing that is connected with the thing that you discussed here, that what we watch, it appears on the algorithm. So I recently got a chance to talk to grade 9 and 10 students during my research fieldwork of PhD. So I talked to the students, to their parents. So one of the students, he shared with me that he was a lot into technology. He was even investing in blockchain and learning the candles and all that stuff there. So that was so surprising for me. But he mentioned that he don't use Instagram. So I asked him that what's the reason behind not using Instagram, and your fellows are using Instagram. So he told me that because Instagram shows you on the feed age inappropriate content. So by his own by his own willingness, he's not like using Instagram for that. So I just talked to him I just commented that like what do you follow and what you watch, it appears on your news feed. So he mentioned, no sir, I feel like the things that are my fellows or in that particular geographical region, if somebody is like looking onto these things, they still appear on my, regardless I'm watching them or not. So that's why I'm not even using that platform. So later on, I talked to his parents as well, and a lot like other parents too. So I got to know that it's from that small sample, that the students among that sample who are using technology very responsibly, I feel that their relationship with their parents was very close, and their parents were used to do frequent conversation on technology and latest things happening. So that could be one of the things that if parents or teachers or anything, they're guiding them, so maybe they can use it responsibly. Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Any comments on that?
Oh, just that, yeah, you get put in a box and you're like, oh, this is what you're like because you're this person in this area. And then you do have to train it to, no, I don't want to see that stuff and I do want to see these things. And having that knowledge is so important to be able to enact to change it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And yeah, definitely, I think you're right. The kind of, the relationship with the parents is really crucial because, being able to have those conversations to, if something comes up that doesn't, feel right. And plenty of the young people that I talk to, some of them did have parents that restricted their use quite, significantly. So they were only allowed to use certain apps or they were only allowed to use them for a certain period of time. But because the dialogue was really open, they felt okay about it because they understood why. And I think being able to have that conversation was really crucial. It made them feel, even if there was restriction, that it wasn't kind of confusing or or they understood how they could renegotiate it if they wanted to. So one of my participants initially, she was using TikTok, but she hadn't been allowed to use it for a while. And then she approached her parents and talked to them about why she wanted to use it. They came up with some terms about how she was allowed to use it. And I think that that relationship to me seemed really positive around, because it created the conditions where she could go to them and say, talk about her experiences, and she had a good understanding of what their concerns about the platform specifically were. And that seemed like a really good, it meant that she wasn't doing anything covertly. And it was, I think you're exactly right that having that kind of closeness is really important. Really, I'd love to hear more about your research.
Yep, another question.
I tried not to say anything, but I had to because I have two teenagers. And my 19-year-old son listened to everything I say. We have this conversation because you keep on saying about parents. I am doing a lot of research on this area. I teach Algorithmic Awareness in business school in my class. My main concern for all of this is my 15-year-old daughter. Okay, she would not have a conversation with me. I'm the same parent doing the same things, and I'm trying to explain to her, and I'm very careful about what we do. And you talked about, they record but they don't share. Of course, TikTok is listening and it has access to your camera. And of course, the Carol Cadwalder, the documentary about Brexit, as well as Nepal, all these civil problems that caused by these algorithms, caused by these, biases that are created through this social media. And these are my scare factor. It keeps me awake at night. That's how bad it is. But I don't have a solution to do anything at home because she does listen, but she doesn't listen. So that is why I want a third party to take action, like banning social media, you are going through this kind of, oh my God, no, they need a safe space. My son is the first batch that had iPad in year 3 in Beacon Hills College in Berwick. I was the first person to oppose. Then they said, oh, we are embracing digital technology. And students could bring apps to school with iPads to school with any apps in them. And I asked the teacher, principal, can I send an app with, an adult app? We can't do anything about it. That was the answer. So when we give a book to a student or child, we give them age-appropriate books. But with these digital devices, no matter what control we put in place, they are exposed to digital content that are coming from others' book, iPad. There is no solution to it. And I do, you're gonna hate me for this, access my daughter's TikTok in a different way. She banned me on that, but she thinks I'm a digital. Am I being recorded? She knows. She knows I have. And now she's coming around. She's 16 now. Now I could see her having a bit of a conversation. But what I want to say is, it is not one size fits all. And no matter how much I try, I feel like a bad parent because I can't get through to her. And I don't know how many of you have different children. My son is amazing. He's way more advanced than me in terms of handling all these things. And I do have two TikTok accounts in 2 phones. One is following right, one is following left. And if I follow the right one for a while, I get brainwashed. I'm seeing those content and I go, and it is so scary. And I do follow a lot of US stuff because the tech bros, and I know the things that they are collecting, like they're controlling. If something happened, all my 50,000 photos of my family photos are on OneDrive. If I can't pay for it, I lose all my photos. And I keep telling my husband. So these are the things that I'm working on. So if they ban, I will be like, please ban. I know all the back end that they can get in. But it is really difficult. It is not straightforward. And awareness, like Carbon Literacy Project has carbon literacy courses. My ambition is to have an algorithmic awareness course, like a little card game that we could go and make. Sorry, I talk too much, but it is something I kept quiet. But when you keep talking about having conversation with parents, I failed.
It's certainly something, we talk a lot about just general digital literacy and how we need to teach, we talk a lot about it. I don't know who else is talking about it, but it needs to be taught more in school because some parents might be managing it well, some parents might not, in the same way that a lot of other things, behaviour and so on, maybe, a teacher or someone needs to come in. And I think algorithmic awareness is something that just needs to be part of your digital literacy that you learn at school. But where is it going to fit into the curriculum? Yeah.
And I guess then the problem with the ban was really clear in what you were saying too. Like your son has great digital literacy awareness. How would the ban have affected him if that had been in place? And yes, it might stop your daughter from seeing content that's not great. But we need more nuanced strategies rather than a blanket ban. It's not going to work for everyone and stuff. Definitely not failing as a parent though. You sound like a parent. Yeah, I hate hearing you say that.
I honestly don't know what I'm doing, but now I'm okay with things that are online of my daughter everywhere for everyone to see. So when I scroll, I see videos of her friends on TikTok because they're all public. She goes, don't stalk them. I say, it's public. It's coming on my feed. What am I supposed to do? It comes on my feed, her friends, because I have curated it to some different content. And some of the groups that are promoting teen moms and promoting different stay-at-home like trad wives,
yeah.
and teen moms is like I get so many teen moms on my feed, and also children bragging about their crimes. I can't even imagine bragging about something I've just done. And these things are real, or maybe not real. Maybe they're faking it, who knows? So how many people have faked their wealth, their children, the disease of the children. So to have this look at me, like me kind of scenario. And my pedagogy is personal connection, because let all of that now have one-on-one conversation, talk to people. So this is something really close to my heart. Take the microphone.
I just wanted to add one more thing. I mean, the other thing we also need to realize as parents, as aunties and uncles and, fathers and grandfathers and grandmother, just because kids are being exposed to certain things doesn't mean they're going to replicate that, right? Because I grew up with Bollywood, and Bollywood is like, okay, drama, violence, guns, everything, right? Like, I didn't grow up to become someone who wants gun. So I think our worry is also coming from like, oh my God, they're gonna get exposed to this, and what if they do the same thing in their life? But that might also not be the case, because of course we need to be worried. We are genuinely worried, and we need to be talking about this. And I'm really glad that you brought it up, like the genuine fear that you have, and it's so valid. But at the same time, yeah, just because someone is exposed to certain kind of information doesn't mean it's going to be replicated or they're going to go and do it, It's also somewhat, it's reminded, because my early days of work was on sexual health, SRHR, and like sexuality education. And when it comes to like sex ed, a lot of parents are also worried about like, oh my God, what if my child, like what if they get pregnant? Like a lot of worry around that. But children also do find information about sex ed from different sources. They don't want to talk to their parents about it, right? So also children do find ways to get information. They also do think what is good for them. They do think about their best interests as well. So again, going back to not to take them as like this naive, body with no agency. Also like believing on them, trusting them in some way. Would like lessen our worry, I guess.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
But-
I grew up with Bollywood, and I watch this. It's more sexual than normal YouTube videos. I know that. But one thing difference is that those Bollywood we all watch together. The entire society watched. Whereas every teenager is watching their own content in different mindsets, and different. Some are really, again, some are really to a very dark space. So they're watching it in their, like Bollywood dances or fights, everyone watched, and they're so far out that we know that that's not happening. But some of them, as I
But
told
I think you should take some credit as well, because you said even though it's been really hard with your daughter, she's starting to come around. So even though outwardly she might not be acknowledging that she's listening to you, it sounds like she is.
Because she does not have a conversation. She's neurodiverse as well.
Yeah.
So she doesn't have a conversation. So it's very hard to explain. My students listen to me, but my daughter doesn't. So, but I want someone else to teach her, because that is what society is about. When I cannot reach, I want someone to reach her. So I tell my students, why do I teach you stuff that are not accounting related? Because I'm hoping someone else will teach my daughter social skills, the life skills. These are very, very important. Do not give this.
Joe, did you want to say something?
Well, I think it's kind of late, and mostly I'll probably just thank you because you've opened up a massive conversation, which is so great, and really crystallized some of the dilemmas for me, trying to work through, on the one hand, some of these big corporations who create this content I'm looking at you, Shubha, because I think you said it kind of most directly, are insidious and don't have good intent. And at the same time, we're talking about empowering young people to be able to use content that may not have good intent. So I think you've crystallized a lot of dilemmas. So I don't think I'll say anything else except to thank you and to say that it was really interesting for me.
Okay, well, I think we can thank our panel members. Thank you very much. So that winds up our session for tonight. I believe that there will be a recording